Hey, it's Tony, and I'm doing something a little bit different with the show. So if you want to get right into the interview, you can fast forward around a minute, and that's where it'll be. Otherwise, here's a couple quick little announcements and requests and all this little kind of housekeeping stuff. So first of all, if you want to support the show and make sure that I can keep affording to do this. Is that even correct? Affording to do this? You can support the show by going to japangear.com/Patreon. You can contribute as little as $1 a month, or $3, whatever you can afford. You don't have to, but certainly every little bit does help. I have to pay for hosting and equipment and just the website and domain names and all this stuff. So if you enjoy the content and you can spare $1 or $2 or $3, japangear.com/Patreon. We just got a new patron, Luca. Thank you so much for your support. It was wonderful getting to talk to you as well and getting to know you a little bit. So again, thank you for that. By the way, I'm going to be in Japan in June for most of the month, around 3 weeks. I'll be traveling around quite a bit. And I'm really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, this is going to mess up my release schedule. So it's almost for certain that I won't be able to release an episode of Ichimon Japan on the 21st. Normally I release on the 21st of the month, and I don't think I will be able to do that, but the show will be back in July. And then as for Japan Station, I will do my absolute best to release one on July 1st, which is when I would normally do that. There is a chance it may be a little delayed, so please be patient with that if that happens. I really want to get one out in July though, so just keep an eye out for that. If you're subscribed, it'll just pop up in your feed. So if you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for. You should totally do that. Subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is you use. Japan Station is pretty much everywhere, I think. So that's it. Thank you so much for sticking through this little intro portion, and here is the episode. Welcome to Japan Station, a production of JapanGear.com. I'm your host, Tony Vega. So today I'm doing something a little bit different with the show format. Normally I'd record a separate intro and then throw to the interview, but today I'm just going to do it all at once. I'm experimenting with this. We'll see if I'll keep doing this, but I thought I'd give it a shot. But today... So we're getting right into the interview. I've got somebody really interesting who reached out to me, and I thought this guy is doing something pretty unique, and I'd love to learn more about what he's doing in Japan. And he's also a fellow podcaster, so much love there. So he's in Japan on the JET program, but he's also cycling in Japan as part of the Japan Bicyclist Club Federation. So I really want to learn more about that. But today, my guest is Zeb Ramsbotham. There we go.
There we go. Thanks.
Yeah. So, take two. That's the secret.
Oh, it's all good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be part of it.
No, thank you for reaching out. I love talking to people doing interesting and unique stuff in Japan, and I'm only one person, so I can't find everyone. So it's certainly nice when people reach out and say like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And I go like, oh, okay. I want to find out more about that. So thank you for doing that.
No problem.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about, I know, like I said, I know you're in Japan, you're on the JET program. Could you tell us a little bit about where you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm lucky enough to be placed in Ishikawa Prefecture, so on the Sea of Japan side, and in a really, I guess for me, small town. Well, I guess for me it's big town. I'm from a town in North Carolina of about 300 people. So here in Uchinada, in Ishikawa Prefecture, we have about 30,000 people. And we are a 17-minute train ride from the capital in Kanazawa. So that's kind of where I'm situated now. And yeah, we love it here. Yeah. So I've never been to Ishikawa, but my co-host from my other show, Ichimon Japan, he lived in Ishikawa for a long time. So I've heard quite a bit about Ishikawa. Does it rain quite a bit over there? Yeah, so we do get a lot of rain, and right now it's very windy. But I've been told that I think June is kind of going to be our big rainy season.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the first time ever, I started taking vitamin D supplements during the winter because I think from like the middle of November until the beginning of February, I did not see the sun.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, he's otherwise, he's very positive about the people and I have listened to your show as well, and it seems like you've had a good time there. It seems like you've traveled a bit in that area, and you've talked about like going to was it the Noto Peninsula, right? With the very well known like squid statue that they put up during the using the Corona recovery funds, and it was kind of like scandalous for a bit, but then they said like, hey, actually, we're making money off of this. It's not we're making a profit.
I feel like they're pretty smug about it now because they're like they have some stat that they like doubled their money or something.
Yeah.
So
like I almost just want to go. Like I mean, you get curious. I was like, okay, I got to go see this crazy squid.
Yeah, my wife has actually seen it twice now, so they're really getting their money's worth out of her.
Nice. So when did you arrive in Japan?
So I'm a really recent arrival, I guess, back in August of 2022. So not even a full year yet.
So were you? Is that the first like year of jets going back, being accepted into Japan after Corona?
No, not the first year, but we were the first normal year.
Oh, okay.
So prior to the 2022 arrivals that got kind of the jet program back on its normal schedule, there was a group that came over in like November of 2021, I think. They had a delayed arrival, but they were able to get in. So yeah, now they're back on their normal schedule of August arrivals. Awesome.
Okay. So what got you interested in Japan and motivated you to get over there?
Man, so kind of the classic, maybe now I think people my age, classic American story. I grew up and playing Pokemon Red and Blue on the Game Boy. Then eventually got a PlayStation, and at some point I realized, hey, like Final Fantasy and Pokemon and all these things I was learning to love. I was like, oh, those are all from this country called Japan.
Yeah.
So I started learning more about it kind of through pop culture. And then I will also never forget finding my first, and I think it was like the 4th English volume published in America. But it was Shonen Jump. Of course, in America, it's a monthly.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and so I got into Shonen Jump, and yeah, soon that just kind of became my like how I made friends and all of that. So I kind of had the classic, into Japanese pop culture and interested in visiting, but I guess really that kind of went away in high school, and then when I went to college, and I kind of forgot about Japan in a certain sense. Like I just didn't really think about going there. And then luckily after my wife and I got married, we came to Japan for our honeymoon. And I think it was a good time to come because I was kind of worried when we were thinking about the trip, I was like, man, like a lot of my childhood, was kind of, centered around the pop culture of Japan. And, I'd built it up in my head about expectations or what it might be like. But yeah, we came over here for our honeymoon and we loved it. And that kind of inspired us to think about, well, what if we tried living there? And then I applied for the JET program. So that's kind of the journey. And there was, I mentioned it in when you apply for the JET program, you have to write a statement of purpose. And I mentioned in there, and this is very true, I found a book in a book sale in my local public library back when I was a kid, and it was called The Roads to Sada, and it's by Alan Booth, and it's about when he walks from Soya to Sada, so he walks the length of Japan, and he did this in like the 70s, I think, and he just tells this story about his walk and, staying in ryokans and like seeing the countryside, and that always fascinated me. So that kind of got me into travel writing and the idea of travel as not a profession necessarily, but something you could do. And I was really kind of enamored by his stories of walking through Japan. And so I wanted to do that one day.
Nice. So I know you cycle quite a bit, but you haven't done the walking yet. Is that still on the list of things to do?
Yeah, so I actually told myself when we were moving to Japan, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back from cycling as much. It's still something I love, but I raced a lot in the United States. And I was like, okay, so when we come to Japan, I'm going to take a step back.
Yeah.
But we brought our bikes with us, and just immediately I was like, this place is perfect for riding bikes. And so I got sucked right back in. So
Oh, okay. So let's get. I do want to introduce the podcast. By the way, it's called Rambling Ramsbothams, right? That's the show. Yeah. So I do want to get into that, but let's get into the cycling because you've got a pretty unique background in that, and you're competing in Japan, and you're part of like a team that you're traveling around Japan and participating in races. I was listening to the show and learning a little bit about that. So. What kind of cycling is it, and how did you like get in on this team? How did you find out about it? Like what was all that process like?
Yeah, so I guess kind of right from the beginning, the type of cycling that I love the most is road cycling. So any form of road racing. So the big kind of categories in the cycling world are track, which you've talked about here in this podcast before with Karen, mega popular. There's track, road, and mountain biking. And then there's also cyclocross and some kind of other disciplines. But I love road riding. So I got interested in doing some road racing here in Japan. And that's kind of that was kind of what sucked me back in to this idea with the team. And with the Japan Bicycle Bicycle Club Federation. Sorry, I always get them mixed up. Because there's the JBCF and then there's the JCF. So I get them mixed up in my head.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that was kind of my introduction with that. And so the Japan Bicycle Club Federation is what I'm most involved with, and they're kind of Japan's biggest organizing body for a road series. So they host something like 20 races a year, and they have approximately 300 teams with a little over 2,000 participants. And it's broken down into specific categories. So at the top, you have the Japan Pro Tour. So those are the Japan Pro Tour teams, so the JPT. And then underneath that, you have the elite teams that go from E1 to E3. And then you also have a youth category, a women's category, and then a master's category, which is kind of for, I guess, kind of older people that not even really older. They can be, in their like 40s and 50s. But I race for a team that's in the JPT. So it's a Japan Pro Tour team. And it's one of 15 teams here in Japan that have that status.
So how did you get on the team? Like, is you just show up somewhere and say, hey, can you let me on? Like, how do you go about that?
I guess you probably can do that. So I kind of really lucked out. I was riding a lot after we moved here and training a lot. And I was realizing, hey, I'm still kind of fit. Like I would like to do some racing. And I was thinking I might land on one of those E1 teams or kind of elite one. That's kind of what I was shooting for. But I kind of posted this like silly story on my Instagram. And I jokingly asked, hey, do I know anyone that knows someone in Japan that's involved with bike racing? And a good friend who actually was my coach for about 6 years, probably, messaged me and I was like, hey, do you remember this guy named Gen? And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I remember racing against him. We both lived in the mountains of North Carolina. We had done some local training races together. And he was like, oh yeah, Gen is Japanese. And it just never crossed my mind because I guess, in America, everyone is kind of American.
Yeah, exactly.
Once
everybody's
once they've been living there.
Dash American, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I never really thought of him as Japanese. I thought of him as, oh, that American guy, you know, that must have some,
right.
you know, Asian heritage.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my friend was like, oh no, like he travels there for work still. He still knows a lot of people there. So I messaged him, and he put me in touch with one of his coworkers, who I had no idea at the time, but is the CEO of a kind of planning software for kind of organizing your training. And he's the Japan CEO for that company, which I use their software in America. And so I didn't know this until after I'd already had dinner with him. And then he was talking about some of the stuff he did. And I was like, oh, I should Google him. And when I Googled him, he popped up and I was like, oh, it's like, oh, he's kind of he's really doing it over here. But so kind of through a loose chain of connections, like friends of friends, I got put in touch with the team that I'm on now, which is called Iname. And yeah, they did like a little interview with me. I sent them my race resume. And thankfully, I kind of had this guy, Gin, saying, yeah, I've raced against him in the US. He was pretty fast. I remember, you know, competing against him. So yeah, it was kind of like a friend of a friend plus past race results, and then an interview process to talk to the team.
Very interesting, huh? And also, I love the angle of like the software was actually developed by, you know, like this company in Japan, and you didn't know it, and you know, it kind of ties back to that whole thing, like these video games and things that we grew up with. Sometimes, like we don't even realize like these things are from Japan, but you know, Japan has its influence, you know, here and there, sometimes in places we don't expect. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really neat too because that guy. So the software actually was made in the United States, but he's the CEO of like the Japan branch. So I guess
gotcha.
He brought the software to Japan.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But he had lived a little bit north of where I was from in Virginia.
Oh.
And he had lived there to learn how to train using a power meter, which was kind of a revolutionary tech for cycling back in the day. And he learned from the guy who created the software how to use a power meter to train. And then he brought that back to Japan and started teaching people here about using it and then also using the software. So yeah, it was kind of funny because when he messaged me and then in a Zoom call I had with him, he was drinking out of a mug that said Asheville. And I was like, oh, that's an hour away from where I live. So yeah, it was just kind of a funny circle of events that brought me onto the team that I'm on now.
Nice little connections there. But like, so okay, so first of all, road cycling, so does that mean like it's you're literally on the road? Like what is road cycling exactly?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, road cycling, you're on a road bike, which is kind of the style. I guess I think when you picture a bicycle, it's got the drop bars, and I'm going to butcher the name. Now there was the revival of the anime series that was really popular, which I unfortunately have not finished. Yowamushi Pedal.
Yowamushi Pedal. Yeah, I've heard about it. And I've heard the name quite a bit. I've never seen it, but it seems like it's got a good following.
Yeah, so that is road cycling. Is what they're doing, which they actually sponsor a team, a pro team that I race against, and they wear the kit from the anime. And
that sounds cool.
Pretty interesting. Yeah, so they that's road cycling, and also like popular examples. I don't do anything like it, but if you think Tour de France, big races like that, is road cycling. But here in Japan, it's unique because in America, when I did a road event, maybe there would be a lap that would be 10 to 15 miles and kind of covering like a longer distance. Or sometimes you would do point to point where, you know, maybe the race would be something like 70 to 80 miles. But here in Japan, their version of road racing is more like Formula One. The circuits are maybe in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 miles long. So you do these short, really fast laps instead of kind of a longer format that I'm used to. And so we do race on the road, but that's another unique quirk of Japanese racing is I've been told it's not allowed to be a road race unless the road is closed, as in there isn't any car traffic along the route, which I guess is why they do these shortened formats with these small loops, because there are so many forest parks in Japan, and it's really easy to close, the few entrances to get in and out. But yeah, so that's the type of racing that I'm doing, is kind of, if you're a fan of Formula One and you kind of think of that style circuit, except we're just dudes on bikes, just riding around.
Cool. Okay. And then like, what is it like? Do you all, I know you said you're on a team, but like, I guess you're all on the road at the same time as a team. And like, how many people are on your team? How does that work?
Yeah. So in the Japan Pro Tour, there are 15 top teams, and each team is allowed to send 8 riders to each event. So we often, you end up in a race that has almost 140 participants.
Wow.
Usually it's a little bit less because maybe some people don't show up. So you kind of have like in between like 100 and 140 people participating in your event. So it's you and 7 of your buddies kind of versus 14 other teams, which each team has 8 people. And then you kind of essentially have a team captain. So there's like a designated leader that he's the fastest one on the team and the one with the most experience. And you're kind of shooting for him to do well. So there are a lot of team tactics involved in road racing. So drafting is big. So if you can ride on another rider's wheel, you can save something like 30% of your energy because they're breaking the wind for you. So you're kind of riding in their slipstream. So when you're in this huge pack of riders, you can go so much faster than you could normally go because the people in the front are working so much harder. So yeah, you kind of are in it to win it, but kind of just for one person on your team. And then there are kind of all these competitions within the JBCF, because there's a individual competition. So the top rider, and he does get to wear like a neat little jersey. I believe it might be red. That's like the leader's jersey for the series. And then you also have the team competition, which I think is kind of what my team is oriented towards, increasing their ranking. So each time you finish a race, depending on how you finish, you score points. And then those points get added up into a big bucket to kind of boost your team and the team ranking.
Okay. And then, so is it like a season thing? Is there a prize, or how does this whole like competition work? And I mean, I know obviously you win one race at a time, but like, then do you progress? Is that how it goes? Yeah.
So the season is from March through November, and I don't know how many races there are like in the pro series. It's about one every month from March through November. And sometimes there are like 2 in a month, but that's kind of like they get stacked up that way. So yeah, it's an overall series. So you kind of do the first race in March, and then you keep going through November, and you're trying to, accumulate your points. And then I guess, that final race, once that's done, they have all the points tallied up, and you have kind of the team ranking for the season. And you also have the individual ranking for the season.
Is there like a grand prize or something? Like how's
That's a good question. So honestly, I'm not good enough to worry about competing for the prizes. So I'm actually not sure if there is actually a cash prize like each weekend for first, second, and third. Okay. So you get to stand on a podium, and you get, the classic like giant check that you get to hold.
Awesome.
And I think first place is something like 500 or 250,000 yen each weekend.
Okay. Hey, that's nothing to. That's pretty decent. I mean, for Yeah. I mean, these guys are, I assume that most are not doing this 100%. This is kind of like they're doing something else to, you know, they're I don't know, make their living, but then this is something aside from that. Is that for the average person how it goes?
So if you are in E1 through E3 or youth or masters, yeah, that's how it is. In the JPT or the Japan Pro Tour, it's a little bit different. So there are probably 5 or 6 teams where cycling is their job. It's what they do. Okay. It's all they do. They are in it to win it. And it's interesting. So there's a governing body internationally called the UCI. And maybe 5 of the teams in the JPT are UCI teams, which means they can be invited to international races. Nice. Or they're allowed to compete in, so for example, right now the Tour of Japan is going on. And so international teams are here in Japan to race the Tour of Japan. There are teams like from the UK, from mainland Europe, and kind of all over. But that's going on right now. So maybe 5 of the top teams in the Japan Pro Tour, so 5 out of the 15 are international teams. And yeah, my team prides itself on, we're all like working class guys. Like everyone on my team has a day job. So we're doing this just for the love of it and because we enjoy cycling. But yeah, some of the dudes we're racing against, it's, 30 hours a week. Wow. They're riding bikes and that's all they do.
Wow. So I heard you talk a little bit about this on your show, just like some of the places that you get to go to. Like, for example, I heard you talk about going to Gunma, and it was this former theme park that was basically shut down, but they're like they still use the track there, but otherwise like the rest of the theme park seems to be like closed. So it sounds like you get to travel around. I don't know like to what extent around Japan, but you get to go to these different places, have some pretty unique experiences. Could you tell us a little about some of these places? Maybe even that. Well, we can start with that Gunma place perhaps, but yeah, any interesting experiences, unique places you've been to?
Yeah, so the Gunma one is really cool. It's called the Gunma Cycle Sports Center, and that is what I was told, that in the 80s, kind of, Japan bubble economy. Yeah, they
were making anything and everything. They were just
which I think we benefit from as cyclists, because sometimes I'll be in the middle of nowhere and I'll be on this huge, well-paved road, well-maintained. It's kind of this 4-lane road that looks like it's supposed to be transporting, thousands of people. And I'll be out there. I'll be the only person on the road riding my bike around. And I always assumed that, during that bubble economy, they were just putting in infrastructure everywhere.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, now it's like, as a cyclist, man, you have so many options. But yeah, in Gunma, there's this funny little theme park, and there's like a roller coaster, which I don't think works anymore. And all kinds of they have like a little center there, but it's kind of, you can tell it's past its prime. But they paved in like an asphalt track that goes around the center, and it's kind of this purpose-built cycling road where they host races and also drifting events. So so cars, I guess, can rent it out too, and they'll do some drifting events up there. Right. But yeah, we kind of get to travel all over and see kind of all kinds of things that I don't think we would see otherwise, because we don't have a reason to go there. Yeah. And then we try and take advantage of it. We'll travel for a race and we'll try and do some touristy stuff kind of before and after the race, kind of travel around, see things. And then while I'm racing, often my wife will go for a long ride herself. And so she'll come back with all these photos and videos and stories about, guess what I saw, and all kinds of stuff like that. But it's pretty interesting because each team can only send 8 riders to each event. So I don't always get to go to each one. There's a certain, hierarchy in the team. And I actually have gotten to go to every single one that I've signed up to do. Kind of, we have a team chat online, and they'll send out a little survey. And you say if you want to go or you don't want to go. and they can only send 8 riders, and we have, I think, 15 riders on our team roster. So yeah, you don't always get to go, but every time that I've been, yeah, it's been a really cool experience. And yeah, kind of cycling has been our way of, seeing Japan. So it's been really nice.
Yeah. So is it mainly in the Honshu area, or have you gotten to go to other islands, outside of Honshu as well?
So not for cycling. The first race of the season was in Kyushu. Okay. And I really wanted to go to that, but my wife and I actually didn't have a car at the time. And taking my bike on the Shinkansen just sounded a little overwhelming. So I didn't participate.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, mostly just kind of right here in the center of Japan. Like this past weekend, I was over in Nagano in Kiso district to do a hill climb up Mount Ontake. So that was a pretty unique experience. But honestly, one of my favorite things that we've done is we do a lot of, so when we first got here, we didn't have a car. And I have bike bags for my bike that I can hook on there. And then we can stuff clothes in there and stuff like that. And so we did a lot of travel just on bikes. When I got a long weekend away from teaching, we'd kind of look at the map and say, like, well, where do we want to ride to? And we'd load up all the bags with our clothes and everything and just kind of hit the road on bikes. And the first trip like that we did is we traced the perimeter of the Noto Peninsula. And that's when I first got to see the Squid King that we talked about at the beginning. Yeah. So yeah, that was probably one of my most unique experiences kind of right off the bat. And it's still one of my favorites is, when we just went up and rode all through Noto and kind of saw a lot of cool coastal villages and towns and the Squid King. Got to see the little city up there called Wajima. And that was like a 3-day trip. So each day we rode maybe 80-ish miles. We had one day that was like 100 miles. So yeah, things like that have been some of my like most unique experiences just with my wife and pedaling around the countryside and just taking it all in. Yeah.
That sounds great. Have you ever had just, random people come up to you, like, hey, something, I don't know. Sometimes they like offer you food or whatever. You hear all these stories of like people being like really nice. And sometimes when they run into like random, especially like in the middle of nowhere, like if you're in some rural town, like people tend to be very like, oh, hey, you're the foreigner. I've never seen a foreigner before. And they give you like some candy or something.
Yeah. I was trying to think.
Maybe because you're traveling with your wife, so at least you're like two people. Sometimes, like when you're by yourself, I think that you're more likely to have that happen to you.
Yeah, and I also we joke about this. We've traveled in Europe a lot too, and like in town centers, there are always the people that, and not that Japanese people are doing this. They're not running some elaborate scam. But people like try and hand you a flower, and if you take it, then they'll demand some money.
That happens.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Old women in the countryside are not going to demand money, probably. But we often joke that I have a fairly large beard. And we often notice that people wouldn't approach me. And so I don't know if also here in Japan, people don't approach me because maybe I look slightly intimidating.
It could be. Yeah, I mean, you don't see that many guys with big beards in Japan, I think.
Yeah, so I'm kind of just this white guy with a big red beard, and maybe they aren't as, open.
Could be.
I did in Tokyo. I've had, people come up to me to talk to me, but so far in the countryside, I haven't had like anything too crazy, like people coming up to me to say stuff.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I would think that traveling around Japan, on a bicycle, it just gives you a different perspective. You get to see a lot of areas that you normally wouldn't get to see. And obviously you already love cycling, but it seems like you've really enjoyed to see Japan in this way.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we often talk about too, you just get such a nice connection that you don't get in a car because one, you're in the wind. So you're kind of getting blown around, and Also things you might not even think about, like smells are so, they're just so much more impactful when you're on the bike. One, you're breathing kind of hard because maybe you're on a hill and you're desperately trying to reach the top. So you're so sometimes that's not a good thing. Maybe there's like some roadkill and you're like, ooh, like need to get away from here as fast as I can. But sometimes, for instance, during the season right after the rice harvest, they'll often dump, I guess, the rice hulls back in the field and they'll burn them. And that smell is something that I really miss. Like I'm already looking forward to the next fall when they're burning the rice in the rice fields again. Because on a bike ride, I'd be out in the countryside and you'd, ride by some old guy just hanging out in his field burning his rice. And it's just a nice, like sweet, almost incensey smell. So something like that is really impactful, and you're just going so much slower. So you get to stop. Like we actually, when we did a ride to Fukui, and we were going to go to Ono City in Fukui, and we happened to be riding by this shrine, and my wife kind of, hollered at me. She was like, "Oh, we need to turn around and go back because that shrine had this massive tree." And she really likes trees. So, and I do too. And we both like shrines. So I was like, okay, that's worth stopping for. Let's turn around. And we rode back to look at it, and we took some photos, and we, really enjoyed the time there. And actually recently, sometimes I have a little bit of downtime at work, and I get into these Wikipedia rabbit holes. And I had a friend ask me what our evergreen trees are here in Japan. And there's the Japanese cedar, and then there's also a cypress tree. And so I'm reading these like Wikipedia articles, and then I noticed a familiar photo. And I was like, oh, that's that shrine that we stopped at. And I click on it, and it's like the Showa emperor in front of the tree. And the tree is like one of the top 30 oldest trees in the world. Wow. And it's just this massive cypress tree, and it's just right there on the roadside, just kind of in this little shrine. And we unexpectedly met tree royalty. And it's the kind of thing, like if we were driving, we would have gone by it so quickly, we may have not noticed, or maybe we wouldn't have turned the car around, because turning a car around, is different than just whipping your bike around. So yeah, stuff like that. We just come across all these like strange little things and all the stuff we've seen. And yeah, it's a great way to see Japan. I highly recommend it. And in general, I found that riding a bike in Japan is just such a like safe and good experience.
And then when you're doing these multi-day rides, like you said, the 3-day ride around the Noto Peninsula, like are you like looking for places to stay? Are you camping? Like what do you do for that, like overnight?
So we I guess we would call it like, essentially we're credit card camping or glamping. We, usually stay in something like a ryokan, because I'm really interested from that book that I read, The Roads to Sada, and just his reading about Alan Booth's trip and all the ryokans he stayed in. That was really impactful for me. And I just love the idea of ryokans. So usually we try and book ahead online so we know where we're staying. And then also we can plan the routes so we know, okay, well, we're going to go from here to here and then from there to there. So that's what we do. Is so far and also it makes it so we don't have to take as much stuff. So right now we only have one set of bike bags. So I'm kind of the donkey. I lug all our stuff around Japan. So I have my bikes all strapped down with bags and everything. And then, my wife is kind of spinning around. She doesn't have as much stuff on her bike, which is totally fine. And we have talked about, though, so we had a friend here recently, and he did camping. So he stayed with us for about 3 weeks. And for about 2 of those weeks, he went on these little 4 to 5 day trips. And one of them was over into the Japanese Alps from here in Ishikawa. And he camped, and some of the photos he took were just really stunning. And he told us about all the campsites he stayed in. So now we're pretty convinced, like, okay, like we need to get our tent over here. but then we need to get some bags for my wife because I can't carry the tent
Even
and
more
our
stuff.
sleeping bags and our so our luggage capacity is kind of our main factor right now, preventing us from camping. So we stay in hotels and stuff like that, but yeah, camping is big on our list for things to do next.
No, that sounds great. Okay, so let's then talk about your show. And so something that I really noticed about, well, again, it's called Rambling Ramsbothams. So
excuse me if I'm a little rambly because I'm used to just chatting with my wife and we kind of go off the rails sometimes.
That's fine. No, and so I will, of course, the link is in the show notes for anybody that wants to check it out. But the something that I appreciate, I listened to a few episodes from the very beginning and then a couple of the most recent ones. And I think this is, of course, interesting for anybody interested in Japan, but also for somebody that is especially interested in jet, either you're thinking about applying, you're in the process, or you're maybe you're a recent person that just went, or maybe you're like me, I was on jet, and you listen to this and you go like, oh, this is like bringing back some memories.
Oh no.
you really take people through the whole process, like from before you went to Japan, and you talk about the interview, and this is at the very beginning, and now your whole process living in Japan and all the experiences you've had during your time there. So it's literally like a documentary of your whole time from before you went to Japan to this very day, right? Like you're still releasing episodes. Was that the kind of original intent to document this whole process?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of started as my wife did a little bit of recording for her work, and she also was doing voiceovers for some YouTube videos that she would make. And so I actually bought her a nice Zoom, H4n whatever recorder. And so we just kind of had that sitting around the house, and we decided to do the whole jet program. And we started talking about it. We both really enjoy podcasts, and of course, it's frowned upon here in Japan. You're not allowed to have headphones in while riding a bike. But in America, I would often listen to podcasts, on 4 or 5 hour long rides. And so we're both big fans of podcasting. And so it kind of just came to us as like an idea, like, hey, what if we started a podcast where we just talk about the jet program and kind of talk about what we're doing? And really for us, the first idea was it would be a really neat audio journal. So, when we're old people and we're sitting around like, oh, remember when we used to be cool and we used to do so much fun stuff? We thought maybe it'd be fun to listen back to. And then also, of course, for friends and family, especially, people like our moms, keeping them in the loop and making sure they kind of know we're doing okay. And, week to week, they can kind of just tune in and see like, oh, what are they up to? Because my mom, especially, sometimes she feels like she thinks it's intrusive to, be, calling me or texting me a lot to say like, what'd you do today? And, stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of the initial intent. Bit of an audio journal, bit of for friends and family. And then we also thought, well, it could be interesting, like if you're wanting to be on the JET program and you are into podcasts, maybe it would be a fun way for someone that's looking at applying to get a little bit of extra info. And now it's just turned into something that's part of our routine and we really enjoy doing. We enjoy kind of sitting down and having our weekly recap with each other, and we can talk about what we thought of the past week and stuff like that. No, it was like nice to hear about your jet interview, and like you guys talking about like, oh, but how are we gonna take the bikes and this and that, and like, oh, like I mean I didn't take a bike when I went on jet, but like I've been there. It's like, oh yeah, I had to go to the interview, and then like, oh my god, what am I gonna take, and I only have this much space, and like anybody that's done this is like immediately you get the memories back. Oh no, yeah. So when were you over here on the jet program?
2010 to 2013. So okay. It's been a little while, but yeah.
What did you feel like the process seemed similar when you were listening to it? Where you're like, oh yeah, that's
Yeah. So, for example, like, I immediately, like remembered, my interview, process. I interviewed in Miami, Florida. There happens to be a consulate, there. So I was living there. So perfect for me. But, that whole process, the statement of purpose and, expressing why you want to go to the place that you want to go. And, I explained all that. And thankfully I got in Kansai area, which was where I was requesting. And then, of course, the process of like, what do I take? Like, okay, so I have to take the suit, right? Because, you got to dress up for the little, whatever the welcome things and all that. And so, of course, you got to take the suit, but then, like, oh, okay, I can't take this thing, like, of course, they tell you all about the medications. Thankfully, I didn't have to take any prescription things, but I remember, them really drilling that down because Japan is very strict about that. And then, of course, when you get to Tokyo, then, they'll take you around, they take you to the hotel and there's this whole like, orientation kind of stuff and, all that. And then you were thinking like, oh my God, what am I going to do with the bike? And we need the bike tools.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was definitely, we were kind of like, what's going on? Yeah, it's such a funny program.
Yeah. It really is. And we're all like, so everybody, goes and, we all meet kind of in Tokyo at the beginning and then we all go our separate ways, but we're all kind of have that very similar experience of like, okay, where am I going to go? Oh, and then you get that, you first make that contact with your predecessor and right. Like, oh, am I going to buy their stuff or, like, please tell me about the school. And then depending on how talkative your predecessor is, sometimes you go like, oh, that was great information. And then other people go like, I don't know, they're not telling me much.
Yeah. I think now did you have, I guess Reddit was around. Were you looking online for different resources when you were first joining the JET program?
There was definitely, a lot of, blogs and articles and Reddit and even back then. But, the classic thing that they all tell you is, was it ACID? No, ESID, right?
Yeah.
Every
ESID,
situation is different, right? And it's absolutely true, right? Like I was in Kobe, like very city, but you hear stories about people being in the middle of nowhere where they have to take a ferry to an island to work at an elementary school. So, it really is, every situation is quite unique. But for example, like for you, what I think you were at a high school. Is that where you teach?
Yep, I'm at a high school, and I also occasionally do night classes, which is just kind of a quirky scenario.
Yeah, that is pretty unique.
Yeah, it's I really like where I ended up getting placed, but that's kind of funny that that's part of the lore now is the ESID because people are still saying that but it is so true because you'll go online and you'll read about what some people were told or what some people heard from their predecessor. Yeah. And you might be sitting there like, well, that's not what I heard. That's not what I got told. Like what, why are you guys doing this? Yeah, it's definitely, a wild experience, but I'm here at a high school and I just have, I guess I'm in a pretty lucky thing because I really just have the one main school that I go to. And then sometimes, really, it's supposed to be every Tuesday and Thursday, but I got a phone call from a guy that worked at my school this week. And he was like, hey, just to let you know, the teacher at the night school isn't going to be there this week, so you shouldn't go. So I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I mean, again, every situation is different, of course, but like even like every single school, because many jets, including myself, like I worked at 3 different schools during the week. So like every school can be totally different. Like one can be like, oh my God, I hate going to this place, and the other one can be like, this is the nicest place ever. The teachers are so nice; they include me in everything. And I certainly had that situation, where it's like one that I didn't really want to go to, and the other one where it's like wonderful. So it's so hard to say like this is what your experience will be like. You can only really talk about it in generalities, I guess, generalizations. But overall, I'm very happy with my experience, and like
everything has its own little negative things, whatever. But for the most part, I think I had a wonderful time, and it's such a unique way also to experience Japan, right? Like we were talking about the cycling, you're getting to see these areas of Japan that most people don't get to see. You have these wonderful little moments, coincidences, but with the JET program, you get to, we never went to school in Japan, right? But we get to kind of see what school life is like, interact with the teachers, interact with the students, and you really get like the stuff that you see in anime. Like it's like, oh hey, some of this stuff they actually do. Like this is like this is real life. Like oh my god, like it's and I don't mean it in a like silly way. I mean like you're seeing kind of like actual Japanese society and culture and direct from the source, right? Instead of seeing it filtered into pop culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I actually have thought about before, that it would be fascinating to see Japan, over the decades, because now sometimes I'll be sitting in a class and I'll see something happen and I'm like, oh, that's like an archetypal anime thing. Like I can see where they got that character from now, because this type of guy and a certain element does exist. Of course, in pop culture, they exaggerate their characteristics. But then it makes me wonder, like, well, did that guy exist in the 70s?
Chicken or egg, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like has anime been around so long now, and it's so into the culture that he is basing his actions off of a character? Or is it the other way? Like, some artist knew a guy just like that in school and then based his characters off that guy. But that's one of my thoughts that I first had when I got here is, I was walking around the high school during summer break and trying to get myself acclimated and looking around. And I can just remember thinking like, oh man, middle school me would be having a meltdown right now, because I was pretty deep into the Japan pop culture back in the day. I was going to conventions and stuff. I was in it. But I am glad that I stepped away a lited bit from that before coming to Japan to live, because I think I would have, blown things out of proportion in my head, or, mixed up, had misunderstandings. But I was standing there in the high school and just thinking about, if I could go back in time and tell my, friend group, one day I'm going to go live in Japan, they would have been freaking out. It would have been like the cool thing. But it's such a wild, it's a great program. I'm a big fan, but it is just, some people get really lucky. And I really do feel like I really lucked out with where I am. I definitely think that, being here where I'm at is perfect. No, it really is. I mean, again, sometimes you get kind of put in some crappy situations. Sometimes you get some teachers that you don't want to work with, and that certainly does happen. But I mean, for the most conceptually, and I think for a lot of people, it does mostly end up being a positive experience. And again, you get to see this aspect of Japan that you normally would never see. And it really gives you a different appreciation. It gives you that context for, how can I put it? Rather than that superficial kind of, pop culture side, you get to see like, oh, hey, Japanese people are just regular people, and some like anime, many don't really care, and the poor teachers, a lot of them work crazy hours. And that was another great thing. Is just getting to meet people, and it's kind of like the whole cycling thing that, I get dragged to weird places because of bike racing. But the JET program itself drags you to a weird place, because I don't think I ever would have picked to live in Uchinada.
Oh, of course not.
I love being in this town. Exactly. It's not something I would have been on my radar at all. So I think a lot of people, I guess a lot of people feel like they don't get lucky because maybe they put Tokyo and then they get put in Hokkaido. And they feel a little slighted. But whatever it is, it gives you this great experience. And were you a pretty flexible person before you applied for the program?
In terms of where I wanted to go, or do you mean in general?
I guess, just in general, like in life, if some of your friends, if you were in the car with some friends and maybe you had plans, but then they were like, oh, we should go do this instead.
Yeah.
Were you kind of...
Generally speaking, I think so. I'm pretty laid back and open to things, but I think I know where you're going with this, where it's like, sometimes let's say like a teacher says, can you do this? Or, just you get invited to something or just something happens unexpected and you just kind of, you got to roll with it. You got to like, okay, yeah, I can do that.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that's probably the number one, that's the number one personality trait. You see a lot of people talk about how they have all these, teaching certificates and everything, and they're so ready to be a teacher. And it's really like, well, are you flexible? Like, are you going to be okay when, things just kind of really go off the rails and there's really nothing you can do. You're just kind of there and have to, go along with it.
Yeah. Exactly. And having a teaching degree and all that can help, but honestly, like a lot of times, it's really not necessary at all, and you won't really get to flex that sort of academic background. So it can often be more about having fun and just entertaining in a way that will get the children engaged with English and have them have that interest. And then there are certain situations where the teachers, the Japanese side of the teachers, right, they really give you free reign to really build a curriculum and all that. But that in my experience and from what I've heard tends to be more on the less common side, and it's they don't emphasize that too much in terms of how they hire.
Yeah, that's been my personal experience too, that I've found that, they, for example, I even have one teacher at my school that yesterday, for the first time, he asked me if in a couple weeks I could start coming to class. Because he always just told me, he was like, please, like, don't come to class today. I'm going to teach. And I think that he thinks his English isn't very good. So I don't know if he's like afraid to teach in front of a native speaker because he thinks, well, sometimes too, I think that maybe they don't know what I'm supposed to do in the classroom.
Oh, that definitely happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And they like think that I'm there to critique them or something.
Oh, could be.
Because sometimes they'll say stuff and then they'll look at me and I'm like, yeah, no, that sounded good to me. I don't know. And so this guy, for the past, 2 months or whatever, since the new school year started, he's been asking me to not come to class. And he finally just recently was asking me if I could come help him in the classroom. And it's funny because the way he asks, it's like it's a burden. I'm like, no, man, that's what I'm here to do.
It's like, dude, I'm happy you're asking me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I will gladly come to class and hang out and talk to the students and help you with the lessons and do whatever you want because I'm the assistant teacher. So I'm here to assist you. So please just let me know. But everything is different because, and then you have, was your school pretty academic?
Not that academic. I mean, just like my main school was a junior high, and of course they did the whole test, high school entrance prep and all that. But my school was not particularly a how can I put it, like academically well ranked school, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. That, a few of my teachers, when I first started working there, they kind of warned me. They're like, just so you know, this school, like, not academic. I was like, all right. I mean, I get it. I was in high school once. I know what's going on. But so that's another thing. If you get placed in, some really rigorous academic school, then the teachers are going to maybe be breathing down your back about what you're doing or what's happening and how many classes you should be in and what your role is. But I think my school offers a little more freedom because the teachers are they see what the students are doing. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, so it can be tough for the teachers in situations like that, but sometimes those kids are very funny and they come up to you, like outside of class, and they'll joke around with you and talk to you. And that could be some pretty fun experiences as well.
Oh, definitely. Like, I got my hair cut and I love to tell the students, so my wife cuts my hair, and that always cracks my students up, even though it is true. So every time I get my hair cut, they'll come up to me and, say something like handsome hair. Like,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, they'll whip out the English sometimes and come up with some funny phrases.
Yeah, which is so funny that they'll do it in the hallway, but then we're sitting in the classroom.
Oh yeah, and they'll clam up, right?
Yeah. I'm like, come on, man. I know you know what's going on. But yeah, it's been good. I really like it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Are you thinking you'll do another year?
So I did already sign on for what is this? It would be next year. So 2024 until August of 2024.
Nice.
And then, so we kind of have that catch-22 situation of we love being in Japan and we really like it here. And we gave ourselves, I guess, we keep, I don't know if you had this feeling too. We keep waiting for, the kind of the bottom to fall out. We're having this like great time. We really love it. But in the back of our heads, we're like, oh no, like it's going to hit. Eventually we'll get to the point where it'll turn on us and we'll realize, oh, we hate it here. We want to go home. Right. We don't want to be here anymore. So we kind of have that bouncing around in the back of our head. And so we're kind of still taking it step by step and still kind of worried. But definitely a few times we've kind of started to talk about, well, we came here with the plan of just being here 1 year unless we loved it. And then we loved it. So I signed on for 2024. But yeah, now we're kind of having that thought like, well, would we do a third year? And right now we think we would. Because, I have this situation where my wife's here too. So we have to, of course, we both need to be happy. But then, we have the whole thing about, I don't think I'm going to be a career teacher.
Right.
So then you run into that life issue of,
exactly.
Well, how much is this benefiting future me just doing the JET program? Because I don't think I'll keep working in a teaching capacity. So as far as building your resume or whatever.
Not ideal, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much a third year would really add. So then, we have that issue of, well, my visa says that I'm an instructor. And if we want to stay in Japan, we would need to figure that out, which I'm sure a lot of JET participants go through. And I think you went through that with kind of, you wanted to stay. And so you're, trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. It's a super common thing, but I mean, and I went through the same thing. Like I was thinking, at least 2 years. And then that second year I was like, I like being here. I want to, do this one more year. And so I did end up doing 3 years. But then, same for me. You reach that point where it's like, okay, so what am I going to do next, right? Like, I could do another year and it would be fun and all, but I should probably like move on to the next thing. And that ended up bringing me to Hawaii to do the master's degree in Japanese. So, but it's the common thing in JET. It's a great experience, but most people do eventually move on and you have to find that right moment for yourself. So, depending on what it is you want to do, right?
Yeah. And then you bounced back to Japan from Hawaii, or?
So I would go every summer, and so I was going back, but I didn't go back to live there for an extended amount of time. Yeah. So I'm still in Hawaii. I'm still here, and I will be visiting again in June. But at the moment, I don't have plans of living there. But if the circumstances are right, I'm not opposed to it. But for now, I'm in Hawaii.
Yeah, I mean, Hawaii sounds pretty sweet too.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. And one of the best things, of course, for me personally, is there's a huge Japanese, influence here. There's a lot of people from Japan here. And it's basically the closest I can be to Japan while still being in the US.
Yeah. You don't have to do that. You have visa treadmill of figuring out, how do I make this work? And
or like because I used to be in Florida. So it was like the 18-hour flight, 20-hour flight, 19-hour flight, something like that.
Oh, yeah. How far is it from Hawaii?
From Hawaii, it's like, it can be like 8 hours.
No way.
So, not bad. It's like an overnight bus, right?
Yeah, or just a quick hop over to Europe or something.
Yeah. So it's not bad. So that's also wonderful. And of course, it's cheaper than from Florida too. So that is a nice thing about it. So yeah, I'm happy for the moment here, but I still maintain that connection, and I still go back when I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's kind of it's such a funny next step, which, of course, then you go online and you read people that they can't wait to get out, and they're like breaking their contract, and
yeah,
they're definitely not re-signing.
No, I mean, there are people that get in some bad situations. I know that.
That's but totally true.
Yeah, but also we need to kind of keep in mind that it's the internet, so you usually only hear like the horrible stuff and the amazing stuff, right? The stuff in the middle, people don't bother to write about because it's so unremarkable, right? So you need to kind of keep that in the back of your mind that you're only getting the extreme perspectives.
Yeah, and that's why we thought when we were first doing, like my wife and I were doing our podcast, we were trying to think of how often should we do it? And that's kind of another reason we came around to weekly, because we're like, well, maybe it'll capture kind of the day to day sometimes, instead of saving up a month of experiences and then only laying out like, here's all the best and here's all the worst from this past month. Like,
right.
You kind of have some mundane mixed in there. Some of the just kind of, well, we finally learned how to buy like peanut butter in the grocery store. So that was neat. Like, that was a good experience.
Yeah. It's all these little moments that, if you've been in Japan, you probably have had at one point or another. But so again, the name of the show is Rambling Ramsbothams. You can find it on your podcast apps. I think it's pretty much everywhere where all the podcasts, you can find them, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So I found it quite easily. Check that out. Yeah. If you're interested in Japan, especially if you're interested in jet, but in general, like, and if you like cycling, then even better.
That's true. Yeah. We kind of, our niches keep going down. We have the broad niche of Japan, then kind of teaching and living in Japan, and then riding bikes in Japan is our very narrow niche there.
But that's great. You got a niche down. That's totally fine. And then anything else you wanted to let people know about? Any other like social media or something like that?
I mean, you're welcome to follow us on Instagram. Just Rambling Ramsbothams on Instagram. Okay. And then from there, it's probably pretty easy to find kind of any of our personal accounts, which anyone's also welcome to get involved with or check out. So
perfect. All right, so go check that out, guys. Zeb, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for reaching out and for letting me know that you're doing all this stuff with cycling and all that. Again, very unique background, so love having people like you on the show. And thanks for making time to tell us all about your time in Japan and all you're doing.
Yeah, of course, and thanks for having me, and definitely thanks for having the podcast. I was searching around for top podcasts in Japan, which is how I found yours.
Thank you.
So I saw it on a very good list of other good podcasts. So I was like, oh man, I want to reach out to that guy. He's doing some neat stuff. I want to talk to that guy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, thank you.
Just do it!